Hello and welcome to G.8 Lesson 3. We're going to be talking about trigonometry. Alright, so first off, trigonometry just is a way to find missing sides and angles in right triangles. It only works for right triangles. And before we can get into using trig, we need to talk about how to label the sides of a right triangle. So here we have a right triangle, and the first thing we're going to label is the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is always the side across from the right angle. So I'm going to put an H on that side for hypotenuse. Next, if they give you an angle in the triangle, so let's say they tell us that this angle is 60 degrees, for instance, then we can label other sides in relation to that angle. So the side that is all the way across the triangle from the angle is called the opposite. So I'm going to put an O on that side. And then the other side, the one right next to the angle, is called the adjacent side. So I'm going to put an A. So we end up with this nice HOA around the triangle. All right, let's do another one. Let's say that this angle is 32. I'm just making that up. First, I'm going to label my hypotenuse. So that's the side across from the right angle, and put an H on it. Then the side that's all the way across from the other angle is going to be my opposite, O. And then the one that's left, I'm going to call that A for adjacent. All right, so now that we've labeled our triangle, we can actually use these trig ratios. There's 3 of them we cover in geometry. We have sine. And sine just means the ratio between the opposite and the hypotenuse, O over H. Cosine is A over H, adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. So depending on the angle, these ratios will have different values, and we can use that to find missing sides or missing angles. So let's say we have to use this picture and find the sine of angle T. Well, I know that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So what I like to do is label my triangle first, like we did on the last slide. So the side across from the right angle is H, my hypotenuse. The side across from angle T, this 33 over here, that's my O, opposite. And then the other one, 56, that's A. So now that I've labeled them, I can write my ratio, sine of T, and I see up here, sine is O over H, so I'm going to write the numbers that go with that. So that'll be 33 for O, over H is 65, so 33 over 65. And I could do the other ones too. Cosine is A over H, so in my triangle, that'll be 56 over 65. See, because I've labeled them, it's much easier. I can just read my labels. And then tangent is opposite over adjacent. So that'll be 33 over 56. Now on the SOL and on tests and things, you should get these on a formula sheet. The formula sheet actually has a triangle labeled with OAH in case you forget how to label it, and it'll have these 3 ratios, sine, cosine, and tangent. So you don't have to memorize them, but if you want to make your life easier, you can remember the acronym SOHCAHTOA. So sine, opposite hypotenuse, CA is cosine, adjacent hypotenuse, TOA would be tangent, opposite, adjacent, and all together we get SOHCAHTOA. So if you can remember that, you are welcome to use that. Otherwise, you will have a formula sheet. All right, so we can use these ratios, sine, cosine, tangent, to find missing sides. So let's say I want to find x. If the problem says, how long is that side? And we're going to forget about y for a minute. I'm just going to cross that out. We just want to find x. First thing I'm going to do is decide, do I have to even use trig? And in general, if you see a mix of side lengths and angles. So we have an angle here and we have two sides. That tells me it's got to be trig. I can't use a squared plus b squared equals c squared because I don't have enough side lengths. So because I know I need to use sine, cosine, or tangent, I'm going to label my O, A, and H before I do anything else. So across from the right angle, this is H. Across from the other angle, this is O. And then the other one is A. So now that I've labeled, I want to decide, is this a sine, cosine, or tangent problem? And that's going to depend which sides you have information about. What I mean by that is I'm going to look at what's labeled. So I see a 7 here, and 7 is H. So I have H, and then over here there's an X. That's what I want to find, and X is A. So H and A, I need to find a ratio that uses H and A. And so ka toa, it's ka cosine A over H. So that's how I'm going to write this equation. I'm going to say, okay, cosine of 36 degrees equals X over 7. That's A over H. Now to solve this, I can actually put cosine 36 in my calculator. On the TI, there's a button that says cos for cosine. So I'm going to make sure I'm in degree mode and do cosine 36. And that got me 0.81. It's always going to be some sort of decimal. So I got 0.81 equals X over 7. Now, a couple options to solve this. You could either multiply both sides by 7, or some of my students like to write it as a proportion by putting this over 1, because then I can cross multiply. I can say X times 1 equals 7 times 0.81, and I end up with X equals 5.67. Here's another example of finding missing sides. This one says I want to find BC. So before I do anything else, I'm going to put an X on that side to remind myself what I'm doing here. Then I'm going to label O, A, and H. So I got H is across from the right angle, so there's H. O is across from my other angle. So this side here, this 12, that's O. And then the other one is A. So now that I've labeled, I need to decide which sides I have. So I have 12, that's O, and I have X, that's A. So I need a ratio that uses O and A, and that's going to be tangent, TOA, tangent, O over A. So my equation becomes tangent of 52 degrees equals 12 over X. And again, in my calculator, I can put in tangent of 52 degrees, and that ended up being 1.28. So now I can either multiply both sides by X, or you can write a proportion. Put this over 1 and cross multiply. So we get 1.28x equals 12 times 1. And then to get x by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 1.28. Dividing there, and I get x equals 9.38. You can also use trig to find missing angles. So in this problem, it gives us two of the sides, and our missing thing is this angle. This symbol is called theta. It's a Greek letter. They often use it in math just to mean a missing angle, so don't freak out. It's just like x. If you want to write x, you can do that. So I'm going to label OAH. You'll notice we always start with that. Across from my right angle, there's H. Across from my missing angle, X or theta, that's O. And then my other one is A. Same exact setup as the last type with the missing sides. I'm going to find out which sides I have. So I have 12 here, that's A. And I have 17, that's H. A and H is cosine. So I'm going to get cosine of theta, my angle, equals 12 over 17. That's A over H. Now, this is a little different because I can't type cosine theta into my calculator. That's not going to do anything. Really, we want to get this angle by itself, so we have to undo the cosine. And the way we do that is called inverse cosine. So on your calculator, if you look at the cosine button, right above it in blue, it'll say cos with -1. That's the inverse cosine button. So you're going to hit second cosine to get to that, and you're going to type in inverse cosine of 12 over 17. And that is going to give you the angle. This should have a degrees on it. 45.1 degrees. So you're finding missing angles. You're going to use an inverse trig function. If you're finding missing sides, then your x will be one of these numbers over here. The last little thing that comes up with trig is the vocabulary angle of elevation and angle of depression. This is just a fancy name for the angle that you're looking up at something, basically. So you might get a problem like this. A tree 40 feet high casts a shadow 58 feet long. Find the angle of elevation from the ground to the top of the tree. Anytime I get a word problem, I draw a picture. So I have a tree that's 40 feet high. That's really bad, but there's my tree, and that's 40. And it says it has a shadow that's 58 feet long. Shadows are on the ground, so there's my shadow, 58. And because I know that this is going to be about a right triangle, I'm going to go ahead and fill in the missing triangle side. And then here's my right angle, assuming the tree is straight up and down. And it asks me to find the angle of elevation. So the angle of elevation is always this angle right here, like you're looking up at the tree at that angle. If it says the angle of depression, it's the same thing. It's always this angle right here. So if I'm going to find this angle, that's a missing angle problem like we did on the last slide. So I'm going to label OAH. Across from the right angle is H. Across from angle X, this 40, that's O. The other side is A. So I look at the two sides that are labeled, and I have this 40, which is O, and the 58, which is A. So my equation, I'm going to use tangent, O and A. So tangent of X, tangent of my angle is O over A, so 40 over 58. And to find the missing angle, to get X by itself, I'm going to need to do inverse tangent. So that's my tan to the -1. And then I put 40 over 58. 40 over 58. And if you're in degree mode, when you do that in your calculator, let's see what we get. I'm putting in second tan, 40 over 58. And I got 34.6 degrees. I put degrees because it is, in fact, an angle. So same thing. The big difference there is we had to draw the picture first. All right, so I encourage you to go to Schoology and take the quiz. Good luck, and feel free to watch again if you need extra help.